Hello and welcome back to For All Kerbalkind, a competitive/cooperative space race in the Cold War era of Realism Overhaul and Kerbal Space Program with none other than TheBeardyPenguin. Last episode, we did some shenanigans with Mercury meeting up with Sputnik. We accepted a lot of contracts. And this episode, we have to do right by those contracts so we can actually get more money from them. And as we move from November through December of 1960, we have some sad or maybe even humbling news from the Soviet Union. December 28th, 1960. Yesterday, the Soviet Union successfully conducted the first publicly realized Earth orbit rendezvous. Though the temptation to reveal Mercury 3's mission as the actual first rendezvous is strong, the United States keeps its secret the best they can. Two Vostok crewed spacecraft launched one 24 hours after the other, and then met each other above the Earth before waving farewell and re-entering the atmosphere. There is some speculation of possible faulty systems with the spacecraft, causing the rendezvous to only last for 15 minutes, but nothing can be confirmed at this time due to the mission's disastrous end. The cosmonaut piloting Vostok 5 was none other than Vladimir Kerman, the first Kerbal to ever reach space, and this mission was meant to be his last before retirement, truly setting the bar high for all cosmonauts and Kerbonauts alike. However, during re-entry, Vostok 5 disintegrated at some point, falling through the atmosphere, and all that's publicly known of the aftermath is that sadly Vladimir did not survive. Rather than feeding a sense of pride that such a tragedy occurred to its rival, the United States, and likely Kerbals all around the world, are left humbled. The great exploration of space is not one without sacrifice and bravery. The cosmos shows little concern of a traveler's life were to end, and yet we boldly go on. This is the calling of Kerbalkind, despite the harrowing dangers, to face the risks, to fly above the heavens, and to reach into the endless black. You will be remembered, Vladimir Kerman. We will remember all fallen heroes in this great race for space, and in their honor, we will soar. Last episode, we focused on mostly money. We needed to get a lot of money to get ourselves back up to par with the Soviet Union. This episode, we need to heavily focus on science because we got up to speed money-wise, I'm pretty sure, but we're still behind on science, especially if we want to get the Gemini capsule anytime soon. As such, we are going to cancel the Orbital Flight 1 crew contract. We're not going to be able to get any science out of this, although it would be fun to fly Mercury 3 again. I just don't see that being an efficient route for us at this point in time. Over here at Wallops, essentially there is an opportunity to make money by spending money. There's smaller contracts that we're not able to complete at our main site because of all the more important missions that need to happen, but Wallops has only been launching tiny Skout launch vehicles on a 20-ton pad, not able to complete those contracts either. We do have a rocket called Pathfinder that we haven't been using, and if we upgrade Wallops in order to be able to use the Pathfinder, we'll be able to complete some of those smaller contracts and just trickle in some money along the way, as well as having more flights. Now, eventually, this will lead to having the 700-ton pad here as well, and it will be more in line with what the first site is now, but we can't afford to just throw all of our money at this site and do that right away. If you take a look at this here, 700-ton pad, it's going to take 2,000 days to build, and that's simply because we don't have a lot of upgrade points in this launch site. The more upgrade points we have, the faster we'll be able to build new facility structures. Now, if I went with a 350-ton pad, that's still 1,000 days, we'd be able to launch Titans, but Titans would probably take a year and a half to build here, and that really wouldn't help us out all that much. I think the most beneficial thing we can do at this point in time is grab a 150-ton pad so that we can launch some Pathfinders, and it will turn into Kelta later on, like Thor to Delta. It's sort of the analog of that rocket, and I hope to launch a lot more of them from here. I'm only going to spend about this much. We're throwing it all into our Rate 1 VAB here at Wallops, almost doubling it. No, we'll do one more, 0.6125, and that will mean Yeah, our Wallop Sun pad is still going to take 400 days to build. Now, these two smaller contracts here will have a deadline of 474 days. Now, our launch pad is going to complete in 400 days. Okay, I took a look at our build times, and it's still going to take between 250 and 300 days to actually build a Pathfinder here at Wallops. That leaves us with the ability of only completing one of these two contracts. This one, the value of this contract is appreciating over time. So I'm gonna leave that appreciate, and I will accept the early navigational satellite, and we'll build something ahead of time and launch it when we have the pad. Unless I dump more money, it will be next year. So let's accept this tiny little contract and we'll have a little bit more money here. Now, realistically, we are spending more money than we're getting here at Wallops, but that should turn around the more we develop it realistically and the longer the series goes on. I'm kind of excited to see where we'll be with this launch site like a decade from now, for instance. But moving on. January 14th, 1961. A nearly identical spacecraft to Markiner 1, which is currently on its way towards Mars, the Markiner 2 is ready to launch for a late Venus transfer window. All that is really known of Venus are general understandings such as its brightness, its relative mass and lack of moons, and what is believed to be a very thick all-encompassing layer of clouds. This has led to several theories regarding the nature of the planet, including ideas that an ocean covers the surface, or a dense swamp, deserts, or even rainforests. Well, the Astral Foundation intends to discover what truly awaits in that distant horizon. Markiner 2 is go for launch atop the Catless Vega. After booster separation, telemetry suggests the Catless is inserting into too shallow of an orbit, and so a command to adjust pitch by 45 degrees is quickly sent. This should allow the Vega stage enough time to still reach orbit despite the initial inefficient ascent. Miko. The Vega stage will now separate and burn to reach orbital velocity. An immediate initial failure to light blares a warning to telemetry, though a reattempt is immediately successful and Vega is on its way. Successfully reaching orbit, a maneuver is plotted to send Markiner 2 all the way to Venus. Should all go well, the spacecraft should reach its flyby destination in less than 4 months. Vega burns through the final bit of its fuel, then hands it off to the Juno 6K upper stage engine for the remainder of the Transvenusian injection. The engine shuts down, and Markiner 2 is successfully on its way. The command is sent to decouple, unfurl its panels, and deploy its S-band antenna. Now flight must wait for an S-band sight to attain line of sight with Markiner 2 before final velocity adjustments are performed to ensure the spacecraft is on target. At T plus 1 hour and 47 minutes, connection is again restored, and Markiner can now fine-tune its trajectory. It's here, however, that a problem arises. Attitude control is offline, save for fore and aft thrust. It appears that avionics, once enabled, is just barely not enough to control the vessel. Engineers conclude additional hardware included on this vessel, in contrast to the first Markiner, brought its total mass 19 kilograms over the tonnage limit, causing pitch roll and yaw to not actuate automatically. Well, although this was not intended or even accounted for in mission planning, the position of attitude thrusters allow for full manual control of the spacecraft orientation, though this method is sluggish and prone to user inaccuracy, as this is the only means the Foundation has to ensure their spacecraft will reach a close encounter with Venus. Flight begins to send commands. It essentially entails only firing certain thrusters full 4 to actuate yaw or pitch. Eventually utilizing over half of the RCS fuel on board, Markiner 2 has secured its flyby trajectory with Venus and is reoriented towards the Sun, spin stabilizing slightly for its long journey into the black. We see infrared radiometry coming down. That's an experiment we haven't run in every biome in low space around Earth. I think many of them, so there's always a little bit of science to be gained from that experiment, but it's on its way to Venus. It will leave Earth SOI and get there in 120 days. That is awesome. All right, looks like our next event before early Hydrolox engines unlocks and before a Skout launch in Wallops, we have Explorer 8 encountering the moon. We're gonna go ahead and close this alarm, and we're gonna go to the tracking station to observe it. Well, all right, checking the tracking station, we found Explorer 8, apparently no longer in the sphere of influence of Earth. It has been kicked out of Earth's sphere of influence by the moon. I don't know what was up with that. Maybe I set the alarm wrong for all I know. But what I do know is that, well, we are no longer able to do anything productive with this probe. For all intents and purposes, it's been kicked away from the Earth, and we've lost Explorer 8. I don't think it has experiments that can be running at this point in time. Oh, in fact, we don't even have comms with it anymore. So Explorer 8 is just lost to the cosmos, pretty much, and it's just space debris. February 11th, 1961. Early in the morning, the Wallops launch site prepares to launch its 5th Skout. Hoping to end the surprising failures of the previous year, the intention is once again a small satellite in orbit of the Earth, with the goal of collecting orbital perturbation data. Skout 5 fires its first stage and is away. Thankfully, Skout 5 performed perfectly today. The SciSat now rests in an orbit of the Earth that reaches over 3,000 kilometers at its highest point. This success comes as a relief to NASA and the United States as a whole, as the Wallops launch site is beginning to undergo some upgrades to launch Pathfinders starting next year. Once again, a tiny accomplishment, but a fun one. Okay, Skout was successful, and now I'm noticing we have 12 science right here. However, we have nothing being researched. Now, if we go into the tech tree, there is one thing I would like that we can get for 12 science, and that is the next solids nodes. It gives us an upgrade to the Skout vehicle as well as the Minuteman SRB, and then we are on our way to getting the 1205, which will be important for our Kitan 3 launch. But I hear you asking, we need to save our science. We have 50 here and then 50 here to unlock Gemini. Well, I think that our mission to the moon when this takes place, and if you don't know about it, we'll find out later, is gonna cover this 100 science probably right away, coupled with, our interplanetary probes that are on their way. I think that we'll have enough science, and it's actually hurting us not researching something right now. We're wasting time, and this is a node that's gonna take hardly any time at all, but I would like to just research it right now, because in the long run, that might be best for us. So, click. That's only gonna take 17 days, but hey, I do like my solids. February 26th, 1961. The secretive Discoverer program sees a 3rd launch from Brownsville, Texas this morning. Discoverer 3's avionics and electrical system has vastly improved compared to Discoverer 2, which could not remain in orbit for its target duration of roughly 5 months. The Catalyst B also sees its final operational launch today, as an improved version of the missile, the Catalyst C, is now available for launches. Discoverer 3 is go for launch. The catalyst burns through all of its fuel before detaching Discoverer 3. The satellite will now use its own propulsion to reach its intended orbit. Unfortunately, as this burn was taking place, line of sight with Discoverer is lost, and all communications went dark. No commands can be sent to the spacecraft, and as such, its propulsion system slowly burns through the entirety of its fuel. This renders Discoverer 3 lost in orbit, with no way to control it. Its active mission has ended before it could even begin. It was thought that communications via Skout or another satellite would persist through orbital insertion, but calculations were incorrect, and the final launch of Catalyst B has gone to waste. All that is released to the public is that the satellite has reached orbit, but no word on anything going wrong. The Foundation considers activating range safety explosives in orbit, but decides against it. Fragments of such an explosion would be impossible to track, creating a hazard for any nation wishing to enter Earth orbit. Besides, if the Soviets did take a close look at the vessel, they will find no film or any true evidence of espionage. Discoverer 3 will simply drift freely above the Earth from now on. May 7th, 1961. The Soviet Union has now an upgraded version of their crewed spacecraft, now called Voskhod, with the ability to carry more than one crew member, and via use of an extendable airlock of sorts, Alexei Kerman is the first Kerbal to perform what's known as a spacewalk, leaving the safety of his spacecraft and floating free in the vacuum of space. The Astral Foundation's Mercury Mark II, later to be named Kemeny, is still in the early phases of development, and so morale once again drops as the United States falls behind on another major milestone. May 14th, 1961. After roughly 120 days in interplanetary space, the Markiner 2 space probe has finally reached its destination. Approaching from shadow, Earth's sister planet comes into view with a bright blue streak across the horizon, and this pale yellow cloud-covered world fills the craft's camera. Venus. Data streaming back to the Earth from Markiner 2 suggests that many people's theories on what could lie beneath the thick layer of clouds is likely wrong. The atmosphere appears dense, visible imaging suggests very rapid winds, and all in all it appears inhospitable to life, from the outside at least. In order to truly learn what lies beneath, the Astral Foundation will have to dive into its atmosphere. But that will have to wait for another time, another spacecraft. Soon after this successful flyby, the United States press will be able to release to the public a real, tangible close-up image of another world for the very first time. The space program as a whole is beginning to receive a lot more attention, more so than a necessary show of force amidst the ever-terrifying Cold War, a chance to explore the entire solar system in peace. All Kerbalkind looks up to the stars each night, knowing that now that we've actually been to one of those distant points of light in the sky, they don't seem so far away anymore. Well, we've flown past Venus, got a lot of science, and a lot of money, and a contract complete, so there's some things that we need to deal with. We're just leaving Venus right now. We're still getting a little bit of science from these two experiments, but a total, hold on, I clicked away from it, a total gain of 139.3 science? That's quite a lot. We have 92 to spare, but the first thing that we are actually gonna have to do here is go into our contracts, and we're gonna have to do a negative thing here. We need to take this contract, which we accepted as sort of a loan, and we're gonna eat 24,000 credit, or 24,000 in total, but we're back in the green again, so all is well. And now let's take a look at what new contracts we have available to us. Okay, we have a lot of lucrative options like flybys of Mercury, Jupiter, Vesta, and Ceres. Right now, we don't really have the tech to actually be able to communicate that far. I guess the closest thing we would have is Mercury, because it's only a little bit further than Venus. Contract duration is about 5 years. If we are able to research the tech for this flight beforehand, it's possible that we could launch this on a Katurn 1 or maybe in a Kitan 3, and it'd be very worth it. Mercury, Vesta, and Ceres have a very tiny sphere of influence, so actually getting there is gonna be a bit tricky with the maneuver node part of it, whereas Jupiter is massive, and it gives us a whole 6 years or so to actually get there. But again, I don't know if we'll actually have the tech to do this, and a trip to Jupiter takes several years. So I think with any of these, what might end up happening is we'll have to decline the contract and accept it again to prolong it and just take a hit of a few thousand funds. That would be the most lucrative for us. However, we have 3 up here: Venus orbit, atmospheric probe, and landing. So my vote is that we prepare for this landing on Venus, entering the atmosphere at the very least. Because after flying by and providing what little information we did, and how amazing that was, everyone wants to know what lies behind that thick layer of clouds. What's it really like on Earth's sister planet? So, first atmospheric probe of Venus, and then a Venus lander. And now we're up to 750,000 funds. And none of these are contracts that we're gonna have to decline and reaccept, except for this one. Because unfortunately, with the build time of the Katurn 1, this is actually not gonna be able to be met. So we will cancel this contract. Gene did not seem very happy about that, but it's okay, Gene, because we can just accept it again. And we only lost a little bit of funds. Oh, I just remembered that we actually have to do the same thing with lunar landing uncrewed. We're not gonna be able to meet that deadline, so cancel contract. That puts us down a lot. Oh no, do we not get the contract again? I'll have to see what happens if we like time warp a day or something. If we don't get that contract again, oh God, that's terrible. Okay, no, we get it back. Ugh, give me a mini heart attack there. Lunar landing uncrewed, there we go. Achieve a soft landing on the moon and transmit science. Now we'll be able to do that by the deadline for sure. And speaking of science, we are going to research the Gemini capsule. Now that's gonna complete in 71 days after this blue sky node here. Now Gemini capsule is going to need more tech nodes than this to become fully operational. First of all, here, we have the Gemini heat shield, and we're only 8 science away from unlocking this. I'm pretty sure that some of the satellites we have are going to be able to do this in a matter of weeks. Back up to the Gemini capsule node, we have the equipment section. You'll see we have O2 pressure controller at crew survivability. That's right here. We have that. And we have a fuel cell at improved power and generation and storage. So improved power generation and storage is right here. That's behind another blue sky node and this node. So this is 111 science points away from unlocking this, and then we get our fuel cells and we'll be able to stay in orbit longer. I think we can do without the fuel cells by adding just a lot of electric charge in the form of batteries. I don't know how viable that's going to be, but I think we're just gonna have to figure it out. Then after those nodes unlocked, we have 2 nodes in the way of docking. Along with all that, it's come to my attention that we have actually lost communications with Markiner 1, our Mars flyby probe. Now it's still going to fly past the planet on its own and collect that data, but it won't be able to transmit that data back to Earth until it's closer to Earth. And now if we're trying to go to Mars again, or if we try to go to planets that are much further away, we simply can't until we get through some of these nodes here. And when we unlock the technology for our fuel cell for Gemini, the next node we'll be able to unlock after that is improved communications, which will get us to level 4, and we'll be able to level up our tracking station again. And I don't know how far that's gonna get us. We have level 5 in the next one after lunar exploration, air electronics research, and that will be level 5 and level 6 tracking station. I don't know how far these nodes are going to get us, but I think we can go to some other planets other than Mars and Venus with just this one. So getting a lot of science quickly is going to be key. Now, as an aside from that, Up in this tech node, we've got the dinosaur. That's right, we have all of the parts needed to actually have a suborbital or orbital glider for US Air Force military applications such as recon, rescue, or intercepting enemy satellites. And along with this crazy node, we have Gemini wings. We have the winged Gemini. I don't think we're gonna use this, but it's a thing. The mix between Gemini and dinosaur is this winged Gemini, and frankly, I don't think it's very practical. But the dinosaur, on the other hand, we might just operate this vehicle. Priority will be after Gemini, but I really want to make this thing. Coming back outside, we have 7 points available, and now to make the most of our funds here, we're gonna put all 7 of these points into our second line. Something else I just now realized is that we need to level up our astronaut complex for Gemini flights if we want to perform any EVAs, and that's going to be 500,000 funds. Now this isn't necessary to fly Gemini, but I do need to do this while we're still flying Gemini regularly, so it's just something we'll have to keep in mind. On October 5th in 1961, Markiner 1 will make its close approach to Mars, collecting lots of science. And we truly hope to regain communications with this vessel sometime soon in the future. I'm unable to calculate how soon that will be at the current time, but we'll take a look at what the trajectory shows us after we leave Mars' sphere of influence, because we should be able to see when we'll be close enough to Earth again just by sort of eyeballing it. And here we are doing our close approach, and once again, just like Venus, we were approaching in the dark and flying past Mars, and we're just barely dipping into the atmosphere there, and then coming back out. I'm not actually going to show in-flight footage of this because we were in the dark for this. We didn't get to transmit back any pictures quite yet. And in all honesty, we were here first. But if the Soviet Union has connection with their probe, when they get here after us, they'll be sending back the first images of Mars, even though we took them first. So we won't take that away from TheBeardyPenguin. But we are now out of Mars' sphere of influence, and we can take a look at our orbit here. It should take anywhere from 800 to 1,000 days for us to be at our periapsis here, while the Earth is somewhere in this area here. So anywhere in the region of what, 1, 2, and 3/4 years. So within 3 years, we might be able to see comms with Markiner 1 once again. And that is going to be really pushing it for this Mars flyby contract, which has a deadline of 860 days. But there's another Mars window coming up in 400 days, just like there's another Venus window in 312 days now. And we're going to be sending out something with both of those, I assume, if we can fit the launch into our tight schedule that's developing. Honestly, by that point, our solar panels will have degraded to about 20%, and they should hold there. And I don't really know if we'll have enough electricity to even transmit all this science that we've gained. So despite everything going perfectly at launch, this mission is largely considered a failure now. But hey, I guess rocket science is kinda hard sometimes, huh? July 18th, 1961. The Soviet Union launches their second Voskhod spacecraft today, publicly declaring 3 crew are on board. This is not something the Foundation will be capable of for quite a while, but it does bring a theoretical US Air Force program called Dinosaur more into the light, as development for this vehicle is also in the very early stages of development, but would be able to bring 3 crew to orbit in certain configurations. Soviet crew technology excels this year, and the United States will be behind for some time still. October 1961. Soviet chatter increases, and intelligence suggests the construction of a brand new, much more capable launch vehicle is nearing completion. Whether this is an instrument of war or exploration is yet to be seen, but it appears to be readying for launch this month or next, with a feeling of importance for sure, though absolutely nothing about its mission can be confirmed. Tensions rise as the Foundation prepares for a similarly important launch of their own. November 6th, 1961. NASA has developed and tested the first iteration of its largest and most ambitious vehicle yet, the Katurn. specifically the Katurn 1. This massive launch vehicle is the first not primarily built as a ballistic missile for military applications. Rather, new and old hardware conjoined together to create an extraordinarily capable beast of a rocket that can lift 13 tons into Earth orbit for the purpose of peaceful space exploration. Its first stage consists of a cluster of tanks from the late Keystone missile used in the 1960s to place the first satellites in orbit, allowing relatively fast production of the first stage. The Astral Foundation has worked hand in hand with NASA in the development of a suitable payload for such a vehicle, and after 5 months of preparation, the mission is ready. 3 spacecraft sit atop the mighty Katurn, and beneath them lies a new multi-purpose, highly efficient orbital stage called Kentar. The first of the 3 spacecraft is called Mayflower, a small craft designed specifically for a soft landing on the lunar surface. On either side, 2 satellites called Lunar Orbiter 1 and 2 will be captured into orbit of the moon before the final landing of Mayflower occurs. Very early in the morning, the Foundation watches with great anticipation as the Katurn's first stage roars to life. Out of the atmosphere, the first stage loses 2 of its 8 engines during the ascent. Nevertheless, telemetry suggests the vehicle is still on course, as all 6 engines of the second stage ignite with a fiery explosion. Despite an engine restart taking place during the second stage's burn, the trajectory still remains on course. Kentar will now insert Mayflower and Lunar Orbiter 1 and 2 into its desired circular orbit of the Earth. Success! The Kentar shuts down its engines and awaits its next maneuver. Initially planned to take place 12 minutes after orbital insertion, Kentar misses its mark due to user error and orbits the Earth once more. It will light its 2 RL-10 engines a second time for the Mayflower mission's translunar injection. The engines have a rated ignition quantity of 10, and 5 to 6 of those ignitions are mission critical, which leaves quite a lot of room for error should any failures occur. Now well on its way to the moon, the 2 Lunar Orbiter satellites unfurl solar panels to keep the vessel alive and well on its 4-day trip. A targeted paraloon of 420,069 meters is tactically chosen to allow a relatively efficient burn while maintaining line of sight with the Earth. Any lower and it would have to rely on Explorer 7 to relay comms, something which is definitely not guaranteed to even work. And so, Mayflower makes its voyage across the black in hopes of landing on a new world. Kentar captures into orbit of the moon, simultaneously adjusting its orbital inclination to be above 50 degrees. This will allow the 2 lunar orbiters a wide range of altitudes to observe and collect data from. Each satellite has roughly 400 meters per second of fuel on board, and as such, they can adjust the shape of their orbit for many years to come. Mayflower, however, will stay attached to Kentar. The Kentar stage has 2 more burns to complete. The first is a small deorbit burn from lunar orbit. The second will be a roughly minute-long braking burn just above the lunar surface before letting go of Mayflower. It will then crash to the surface as the small lander detaches to softly touch down on its own. Due to a high orbital inclination and the current phase of the moon, Mayflower's targeted landing site is Mare Crisium, the Sea of Chryses. This site provides a very large and flat area for a safe landing, as well as line of sight with the Earth while interacting with the surface one way or another in broad sunlight. Kentar brings Mayflower closer and closer to the surface as craters whiz past and the radar altimeter begins to go up and down like crazy. Tensions rise at ground control. Coming up is the most anticipated moment of the mission: actually landing on the moon. Approaching 2 kilometers from the lunar surface with a mostly lateral velocity of 1,600 meters per second, Kentar lights its engine again to slow down, while applying pitch to maintain a specific altitude above the surface. This is critical, as Mayflower has a low thrust-to-weight ratio and a very limited quantity of fuel. Telemetry suggests the braking altitude is lower than intended, and corrective adjustments aren't as severe as desired. This will leave the lander without much time to react, so it's cutting it close. As a counter to this, once Kentar has halted lateral velocity, it will cut its engines, rotate 90 degrees upwards from the surface, and light its engines one last time, giving Mayflower the best chance of success it can. The maneuver is performed, but immediately begins to cause an unplanned yaw and Kentar begins to tumble, completely undoing any advantage Mayflower had. This does trigger the lander to decouple, and it adjusts its own attitude upwards before lighting its engine and slowing down. This was a costly adjustment with Kentar, with absolutely no room for error, and as telemetry streams back to the Earth, all anyone can do is cross their fingers and hope it survives. Suggests Mayflower has shut down its engines after a very abrupt cut to its rate of descent from 6 meters per second upwards to 2 and settling at 0. Data begins to transmit. Mayflower has survived the landing. With data suggesting a bounce and visible imaging suggesting its landing legs have entirely crumbled upon the harsh impact, sure. But its electrical instruments have survived, and the lander appears in good shape regardless. Pulses of RCS are even able to straighten Mayflower onto its 2 engine bells as a makeshift platform. Due to the nature of its instruments and its inability to move across the surface, its active mission ends merely 15 minutes from touching down. But the prospect of this feat, possibly being the first nation to successfully land a vehicle on an alien world, fills rooms across America with cheers, wonder, and suspense awaiting any news from the Soviets. Now back to lunar orbit, where both satellites have experienced an anomaly with their fuel tanks becoming under-pressurized, disallowing the use of their primary thruster. However, lateral reaction control thrusters are tilted ever so slightly aft, allowing a slight adjustment of velocity. Lunar Orbiter 2 uses this method to slowly lower its orbit over the course of 3 revolutions or so, before adjusting its panels towards the sun once again, having used practically all of its fuel it could. Lunar Orbiter 1, under the advice of Eileen Kerman, pilot of Mercury 2 and advocate for the maneuver about to be mentioned, suggests that it performs the should-be-patented seesaw maneuver to lower its orbit more efficiently. The Astro Foundation agrees, and the satellite dips forwards and backwards over the course of several orbits, successfully lowering its orbit as desired while using less fuel than the other satellite. Telemetry suggests no damage has occurred because of this, and both satellites now drift apart from each other while collecting scientific data from both high and low space around the moon. May their life endlessly circling Earth's natural satellite be long and prosperous. The mission is deemed a great success. Well, we have done it. We've landed a probe on the moon and sent 2 orbiters into low and high, sort of like between the 2 orbit of the moon. Though they didn't really work as intended, they will work for us perfectly fine. Our lander has given us 25 credits. Our Orbiter 1 has given us 13, Orbiter 2 has given us 11. Those will spend many years in orbit, giving us this science experiment right here, the Orbital Perturbation Experiment. That's going to take a long time to complete. The more orbiters we send out there with that experiment running, the faster it will complete, so we'll likely send some more out there at a later time. As for our science, we got 55.4 science. So rather than having a weirdly almost the right sized heat shield, we're gonna grab early landing so we can have the correct heat shield for the Gemini spacecraft. There we go. That will be 71 days, perfect. And we have some upgrade points from science that's gonna go directly into our rate 2 once again to make that just a little bit faster. Taking a look at contracts, we have an advance of 81 and a completion of 200K to land on the moon again. Although we don't really have that much science to collect from the surface of the moon, and the cost of a Katurn 1 rocket to launch is about 150,000 funds, so that's not really that great of an option for us. However, we have lunar landing and sample return. This is something we might be able to attempt, though I'm not entirely certain yet. So I'm gonna keep this one on the back burner. And we also have first EVA. This one has a duration of 474 days before it expires, and it cannot be declined once it does. However, we are going to have Gemini in this time, about 70 days till we have the heat shield, and then we'll be able to build a sort of bare bones Gemini that can stay in orbit for 2 to 3 days or so, because like I said, we haven't unlocked the fuel cells. But honestly, our most efficient form of getting money and funds right now is a launch of Gemini, so this one's looking real enticing. So I will accept that, and we have one more available contract slot. I think what we'll do is we'll save this one for later, but we will definitely be doing this probably in the next few years or so. This one here for the Gemini capsule, like I said, we don't have the fuel cells yet, so we can't complete a mission that has us stay up for a week or more, but this will be really profitable for us as well. So it's really important that we get that fuel cell so we can get Gemini up to its full potential. Or maybe even Dinosaur if we want to go that route. Our first Gemini mission is being built, and we have bumped that to the top of our build queue. 125 days from now, we'll be rolling this out to the pad. Now, part of that mission for Peter and Eileen to both fly our first EVA. Now, the Soviets have already done that this year. We're about a year behind in this front, but it's going to get us a lot of money, and the Gemini flights are going to get us a lot of science, so they need to be top priority. Now, in order to actually complete contracts with the vessel, we need fuel cells, so we need more science. Now, this is going to get us science for fuel cells, hands down, along with our lunar orbiters collecting science passively, and then these flights getting a crap ton of science as well. We'll be building Gemini 2 after we have the science unlocked for the fuel cells. But we need to upgrade the astronaut complex here to get EVAs. That's 500,000 funds gone. That's going to be done in only 57 days. Now we have 768,000 funds, and we have income on its way. The EVA from this flight will be good income. Crew count record of 2 crew and crew duration record of 2 days is going to be good income. Okay, I gave our R&D 2 points. I gave our first line 2 points just to even out that number. And then I gave our second line something like 16 or so points. And we have that at 2 build point per second now. So I'm going to leave us with this amount of funds just in case everything goes wrong and we need money to build the missions again. And it's time to move forward to our next launch. November 28th, 1961. For a year now, the Astro Foundation was looking into an ICBM called Kitan for use as a space launch vehicle, but haven't since better options existed at the time. Now, with a recent iteration of the missile, the Kitan 2 outperforms the Catalyst by a small margin, and so the Foundation begins work assembling their own. Its first launch, late in the evening, late in the year, will be a joint effort for NASA and the US Air Force for both scientific study and juicy espionage. The new lift capacity allows for 2 Discoverer satellites to be launched, and the Wallops team convinced Brownsville to lift 2 more Scouts along with. In contrast to the launch of Discoverer 3, should all go well, the satellites will not have to insert themselves into orbit, no longer endangering comms blackout with the engines still running. The first Kitan 2 is go for launch. Similar to old sounding rockets and largely used by Soviet launch vehicles as well, Kitan 2's upper stage will hot stage. That is, the engine will light while still attached, using the last bit of thrust from the main stage to ullage fuel. It then detaches and will further push the Discoverer mission all the way to its intended orbit of the Earth. Second engine cutoff, and the mission is in orbit. Before risking blackout, the Scouts RS-3 and RS-4 detach from the upper stage, now free-floating in orbit to collect orbital perturbation data and provide communications for other missions, including this one actually. Discoverer 4 and 5 await the green light on comms before also detaching from the upper stage of Kitan 2. They have a very particular intended orbit of the Earth, and for good reason. Now some orbital corrections must be made to reach this orbit. The intended orbit is roughly 140 kilometers by 140 kilometers, with an orbital inclination of 100 degrees. Essentially, just skimming the atmosphere in a slightly retrograde orbit. The reason for this is, in all aspects, deterrence. Mercury 3 displayed the feasibility of rendezvous with a Soviet satellite last year. Later on that year, the Soviets rendezvoused 2 of their crewed spacecraft in orbit. It is safe to say the possibility of a Soviet spacecraft rendezvousing with Discoverer and, well, discovering its true purpose weighed heavily on the minds of flight engineers designing the mission. Finding all present ideas of active or passive proximity defense mechanisms far too impractical, or dangerous even, the previously mentioned orbital parameters serve to simply be as difficult as possible to rendezvous with. Despite this, the possibility of this occurrence is still likely, and just as likely as the United States being entirely unaware of the Soviets' attempts to do this. We just might not know it happened until after the fact, at which point contingency measures will be put into effect. For now though, both Discoverer satellites have reached their intended orbit, with Scout RS-3 and RS-4 also operating nominally. The mission is a success. Alright, the first Kitan launch was a success, and now we have no more launches for the end of the year, so that's gonna be it for this episode. We have some tech unlocking early next year as well. We'll need to put those heat shields on Kemenai here. I'm just gonna go ahead and make an alarm for 30 days, and we're gonna time warp ahead to the end of the year, but I'm also gonna make one for 146 days, because that should be when we bring back those 2 Discoverer satellites from orbit. They have film inside of the capsules, and we need to bring those back to the United States before the Soviets get their grimy little hands on them. So we're gonna add that alarm. That's gonna happen earlier on in the year. What's gonna happen first though is Kemenai launching. Oh man, I'm so excited to launch this. Okay, let's time warp ahead here because in 30 days, I'm curious to see how much science we get now that we have a bunch of satellites in orbit just streaming that stuff down. So if I time warp ahead here, 90, look at that! That is incredible! And this is just passive science, honestly. That's just passive science. Okay, so yeah, that would be it. It's December 28th, it's the end of the year. Before we go, let's grab some more science. We are gonna go with the fuel cells right here. That way we can actually make money with our Kemenai launches rather than just science. So we're gonna grab basic power, gen and storage. Well, actually no. Let's grab this one first. This opens up more options sooner. So we'll grab this one, it'll take 70 days. And then we'll grab this one because it's a prerequisite of this one clearly. 30 there. So now we have 18 science left, and that has been very quickly increasing. And that's going to be real nice for our moon things that are coming up rather quickly. And lastly, we have 4 upgrade points from our science gain, and that's going to be ever increasing as well, which is awesome. And I'm going to put all 4 of those into our science just to boost it ever so slightly. But that's it for wrap up. If you'd like to see what the Soviets have been up to in a lot more detail, I'm not trying to give away too much information on what Beardy's been up to in these videos, because I'd like you to go watch his video and find out for yourself like I will be doing. But all in all, we had some ups, we had some downs, but my god, the ups though. This year has been fantastic. We're still behind the Soviets, but we have really bolstered our program, and I'm pretty happy with how we're running the space program here, even though we are behind. And we'll just see what the future has in store for us. Thank you so much for watching, and peace out.